not bad. Honest. She's just dumb. Always falling in love with some man just because he's good-looking.
For over 6 decades, one question has echoed through the golden halls of Hollywood and the shadowy corridors of political power. What really happened to Marilyn Monroe? They said it was suicide, a tragic overdose, an ending as dramatic as the life that preceded it. But what if the truth was far more disturbing, more orchestrated than anyone dared to admit? What if Marilyn didn't just die, but was silenced? She was beauty incarnate, a symbol of fragile fame. But behind her smile, behind the red lipstick and spotlight, lived a woman tormented by demons not entirely her own. Men in suits, closed doors, missing documents, whispers of Kennedy, rumors of wiretaps, a mysterious diary that vanished without a trace. This isn't just a story about a starlet who shined too bright and burned out. It's about a system that built her, branded her, broke her, and then buried her under a narrative too convenient to be questioned until now. Because new voices are speaking, old secrets are resurfacing, and the pieces of the puzzle are finally falling into place. But the image they reveal, it's not what you're hoping for. Before she became a legend, before she captivated the world with her breathy voice and magnetic gaze, she was just Norma Jean, an unwanted child in a world too unstable to hold her. Born in 1926 in Los Angeles, Marilyn Monroe's earliest memories were not of lullabies or loving arms, but of orphanages, foster homes, and the persistent ache of abandonment. Her mother, Gladys, was in and out of psychiatric institutions, and her father was nothing more than a blank line on a birth certificate. From the beginning, she was surrounded by silence, by unanswered questions, and by the crushing uncertainty of not belonging. Hollywood would later craft her as a dream, but the girl inside that dream had long since learned to survive without one. By 16, desperate to avoid returning to the orphanage, she married a neighbor, a marriage not of love, but of necessity. While her husband was away at war, she found work in a munitions factory. There, amid the clanging machines and wartime exhaustion, a photographer discovered her. That single photograph altered the course of her life forever. Modeling brought her fame. Acting brought her something else, a chance to be someone new. She became Marilyn Monroe, a name carefully chosen by studio executives to sparkle under marquee lights. And sparkle she did. Her presence was undeniable, her beauty transcendent, and her ability to hold the world's gaze seemed effortless. But while the public adored her, Marilyn was already beginning to fracture beneath the surface. Behind the scenes, she was often restless, sleepless, and overwhelmed. She studied acting fiercely, seeking legitimacy in an industry that only wanted her as an icon, not an artist. She was intelligent, well-read, sensitive, and yet endlessly bound to the role of the naive blonde bombshell. Hollywood adored her body, but ignored her soul, and Marilyn knew it. By the early 1950s, she was everywhere: magazine covers, movie posters, red carpets. Films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire turned her into a global phenomenon. But with every spotlight, her shadow grew longer. Studio executives controlled her image, her contracts, even her diet. She belonged to the public, but privately, she felt more lost than ever. This was not just the rise of a star, it was the making of a myth. A woman who embodied every man's desire and every woman's envy, yet rarely her own peace. The world watched her laugh, flirt, dazzle. But few ever asked what she was hiding behind that carefully painted smile. And as the cameras rolled and her fame skyrocketed, something darker began to take root. Because behind all the glitter and gowns, Marilyn Monroe wasn't just struggling with fame, she was struggling to stay alive. Marilyn Monroe's ascent was dizzying. In just a few years, she became a global icon, with studios clamoring to cast her fans, flooding theaters, and journalists hanging on her every word. But the price of fame was steep, and for Marilyn, it came not just in dollars, but in pieces of her soul. The girl who once found solace in make-believe was now trapped in a role she couldn't rewrite the eternal blonde bombshell desired, but never understood. From the outside, her life seemed like a fairy tale. She starred in box office hits, posed for glamorous photo shoots, and charmed audiences with her signature blend of innocence and seduction. Yet behind the scenes, she was drowning in expectations she never asked for. Studios typecast her, dismissed her intellect, and pushed her into roles that required more cleavage than character. Marilyn wanted to truly act, but Hollywood wanted a fantasy, not a woman. Her defiance began quietly. She walked off sets, rejected demeaning roles, and challenged her studio 20th Century Fox in ways that few actresses dared. She demanded better scripts, higher pay, and respect for her craft. And when they pushed back, she pushed harder. But each act of rebellion came with consequences: suspensions, media smear campaigns, and whispers that she was difficult. Publicly, the smile never faded. But privately, the toll was mounting. Marilyn's battles with anxiety, insomnia, and depression intensified. Prescription pills became her nightly refuge, champagne her constant companion. She was often late to shoots, missing rehearsals, forgetting lines, not because she didn't care, but because she was unraveling under the weight of everything she was pretending not to feel. Her love life was no sanctuary. 3 high-profile marriages, James Dougherty, Joe DiMaggio, and Arthur Miller, each promised hope only to end in heartbreak. DiMaggio wanted her off the screen. Miller loved her mind, but couldn't bear her fragility. The deeper she searched for someone who would see her not just Marilyn, but Norma Jean, the more she seemed to lose herself. Then came the rumors. Powerful men, private meetings, political entanglements, whispers of affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. To the public, they were thrilling tabloid fodder. To Marilyn, they were tangled threads of desire, rejection, and secrecy. If she had hoped that proximity to power would finally grant her protection or purpose, she was mistaken. Her final films were chaotic. The misfits left her emotionally shattered. Something's Got to Give was never finished. As her professional reliability declined, so did the industry's patience. And though her fans remained loyal, the executives, producers, and co-stars who once sang her praises now called her a liability. Marilyn Monroe wasn't falling, she was fading. Fading from herself, from control, from the industry she once conquered. The woman who had once stood beneath flashing cameras and roaring crowds now stood on the edge of something far more silent and dangerous: complete emotional collapse. By the time Marilyn Monroe stepped onto the set of Something's Got to Give in 1962, she was no longer the same woman who once lit up the screen with a single glance. Her eyes were tired, her voice slower, her smile more forced. Hollywood had consumed her youth, her energy, and now, bit by bit, it was draining her will to keep pretending. She was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Insomnia haunted her nights. She often lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled in loneliness and regret. To sleep, she relied on sedatives. To wake, she reached for stimulants. Her medicine cabinet, once a tool for survival, had become a silent accomplice to her decline. She wasn't trying to die, but she didn't quite know how to live either. Behind closed doors, her world shrank. Friends drifted away, unsure how to help or unwilling to be pulled into her sadness. The studio sent doctors, but they treated her like a product, not a person. Photographers caught her in moments of silence, her eyes distant, her expression hollow. And when the press printed stories about her erratic behavior, they missed the truth entirely. Marilyn wasn't unprofessional. She was unraveling. Her relationship with Arthur Miller, once a beacon of intellectual hope, had collapsed under the weight of misunderstanding. He wrote of her to have survived so long, to be so sensitive, to try so hard to be good. That is the miracle. But by then he had already left. She had become too much to carry. Her therapist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, became one of the few people she trusted. Yet even he couldn't shield her from the growing shadows. Rumors swirled of government surveillance, of phone taps, of a secret diary filled with dangerous names. She was tangled in relationships with men who had everything to lose, men who couldn't afford her vulnerability, her unpredictability, her pain. There were days she spoke of feeling watched, days she feared the silence more than the cameras. She once confided to a friend, "I am alone. I am always alone, no matter what." And slowly, the isolation hardened. It wasn't a sudden crash, but a slow erosion of trust, of strength, of hope. Like a shoreline eaten away by waves, bit by bit, until nothing familiar remained. On August 5, 1962, she was found lifeless in her home. The official report claimed an overdose, but the unanswered questions screamed louder than the headlines. No pills in her stomach, no suicide note, changed testimonies, clean bedsheets, a diary that vanished. Marilyn Monroe didn't just die that night. She disappeared into rumor, into myth, into the spaces where truth is too dangerous to name. It's easy to remember Marilyn Monroe as the glamorous icon, the red lips, the white dress, the voice like a whisper wrapped in velvet. But here at Legends and Secrets, we believe her story demands more than admiration. It deserves understanding. Marilyn wasn't just the most photographed woman in the world. She was the most misunderstood. A woman who spent her entire life trying to prove she was more than the role she was given. She fought to be seen not as a symbol, but as a human being, intelligent, fragile, fierce, and deeply wounded. And yet the world rarely looked beyond the surface. We believe the true tragedy of Marilyn Monroe isn't simply her death, it's the fact that no one truly listened while she was alive, that her cries for help were reduced to gossip, that her struggle for artistic and personal identity was buried under camera flashes and tabloid lies. Whether or not the rumors surrounding her final hours are ever fully proven, the patterns are clear. A system that profited from her pain, men who adored her body but dismissed her voice, an industry that built her, broke her, and walked away when she needed it most. So now we ask you, what do you see when you look at Marilyn Monroe? Do you see the legend, the myth, or do you see the woman behind the myth reaching out, hoping someone will finally understand? Some say Marilyn Monroe died of heartbreak. Others say she died of secrets too heavy for one soul to carry. But maybe, just maybe, she died of being unseen in a world that never stopped looking at her. In the end, she left behind no farewell, no final words, just a legacy wrapped in contradictions. The laughter on screen, the tears off camera, the brightest smile in the loneliest room. She was the dream girl of a generation, yet she spent her life trying to wake up from a nightmare no one else could see. Her death left a void, but more haunting is the question it still echoes. Did we ever really know her, or did we only ever love our version of her soft, sweet, silent? And maybe that's what makes her story endure. Not just the beauty, not just the tragedy, but the ache of something unfinished. A truth never told. A diary never found. A goodbye never said. Some stories were never meant to be known, but now, you know. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a legend, she was a mirror, and what we see in her story, shattered or shining, says more about us than we dare admit.